Howdy there, my fellow Americans. I'm Jed, and this is Prez. All right, everybody, we're gearing up for episode 6. Super excited. We got more facts to tell you. Got more presidents to rank. It's gonna be a blast. So buckle up, sit back, and enjoy the ride. First president we're ranking today is James Garfield. He was our 20th president. He is a Republican, and he was president in 1881. All right, James A. Garfield.
But Jed,
What?
you said 1881.
Yeah, he was shot.
Oh!
Well, yeah. He was shot, and that was probably one of the most, it was actually, this is going to sound mean and morbid first, but it was actually good. What? Okay, so let me set the stage for you once again. Reconstruction is over, and America's trying to get back to normalcy, and James A. Garfield wants to reform the government, or the political system, you might say, because putting another thing into perspective, when presidents went into power, their party took control of government programs, of like the local sheriff's office, like all kind of stuff like that, because that party was in power. So Republican president, Republican political power. Democratic president, Democratic political power. So that party had a lot of say in what was going on. So a lot of times, if you were a friend of the party and you maybe gave a little bling to help the campaign fund, then you would get a cushy government job. This was not good, but it was true and it was happening, and there was no denying it happening. And so James A. Garfield was one of the first people really pushing for reform. And so he was killed by someone looking for a government job. They shot him because they weren't given a government job because he was elected. And he was mad about it. But him, before he was shot, he couldn't really get the bills passed because, it was like, oh, you're a new president, I get it, you want to make your mark. But now that he was killed, a martyred hero, and he was killed by the system he was wanting to get rid of, that made it a landslide legislation where his successor, Vice President Chester A. Arthur, we'll get to him a little later, was getting that done. So by him dying a hero, he was getting the government back in shape. And so even though he didn't really do anything while he was president, his death made politics what they are today. Thanks, Garfield! Now on to the next president. Next up is Gerald Ford. He was a Republican. He was our 38th president, and he was president from 1974 to 1977. Gerald Ford came on right after Nixon, and as you know, after Watergate, everything turned upside down. Nobody was trusting the government. Absolutely nobody. You couldn't trust them because now you know that they can plot and kill you, and they can prolong wars to get elected and stuff. So everybody's really scared, and Gerald Ford became president after Nixon resigned. But here's a crazy tidbit. Okay, so Richard Nixon's vice president that he ran with, Spiro Agnew, resigned after money laundering, not paying his taxes. So he needed to pick a new vice president. He picked Gerald Ford. But before Congress could give the okay with Gerald Ford, Nixon resigned. And so Gerald Ford didn't get clearance to become vice president. And so he became president before he was even cleared to be vice president. So automatically, American people are skeptical because they're like, we don't even know this guy, and you gave him complete control of the nation. Not complete control, but he's president, which is a big deal. And so everybody's really skeptical of this guy, especially after he pardons Nixon of all crimes, which means Nixon's not going to jail, Nixon's not having a trial. All of that illegal stuff Nixon did is passed to the table. You're going to say, Jed, how is this guy good then? How did he get this high for all this stuff? Well, that might not have been a bad thing. Slow down. I get it. Okay, how could pardoning Nixon be a good thing? Well, I'm going to help you understand. Okay, so aside from this, just getting that out of the way, the economy was under Gerald Ford, nothing to be excited about. We're going to focus really on Watergate because that's what he really shined through with. So Gerald Ford was an honest man with high morals. And once the American people knew that by looking into his files, like he had been in government for a long time and had never done anything sketchy. He was very honest and very upright. And so him pardoning Nixon was his first step in returning the nation back to normalcy after this crazy shabacle. Because he knew that if Watergate wasn't put to a close early on, that it would continue and continue and continue and just completely ruin not only his presidency, but it would like go on for maybe even a decade of people just talking about this and trying to get it uprooted and stuff. And so he knew if he pardoned Nixon and if he put an end to this here and there, then he could get the nation back on track to being America again and not being Watergate land. So him pardoning Nixon and him being honest and him releasing all this, like making sure that the public knew what was wrong, but now that they could get back to normal, really showed how good of a leader he was during this troubled time because he was helping us get back to normal. All right, moving on from Gerald Ford to a very similar case and a very similar president, Calvin Coolidge. He was our 30th president. He was a Republican, and he was president from 1923 to 1929. You guys remember Warren G. Harding? Another very corrupt presidency, much like the end of the Nixon presidency. And Calvin Coolidge had just the same job that Ford did. He took over when no one trusted the government. And again, Calvin Coolidge was the perfect guy for this job. He was very honest and he was very well spoken. He was known to be a man of very few words, and he picked his words very well. He let people come into the White House and shake his hand to let them know that he was going to get them through this. The economy was okay during his presidency, but just like with Ford, I'm gonna focus on what he did to return the nation back to normalcy. There were investigations happening during his presidency of what Harding did, and he wanted them. He was like, come into the White House, look at everything you need, because he wanted them to make sure that things were unearthed and things were found out. Like I said, he was a man of very well picked and few words. One time he was at a dinner party with a foreign dignitary. The foreign dignitary said, I bet I can make you say more than 5 words by just talking to you. You know what Calvin Coolidge said? You lose. Okay, but anyway, this was a great side of Calvin Coolidge's character. He knew he didn't need to talk too much. He wasn't a pushy politician. He was just a down-to-earth, honest guy. Really what we needed in that point in time. Next is William Howard Taft. He was our 27th president, and he was a Republican. He was president from 1904 to 1913. William Howard Taft came at the end of the long reformer age of all of the, middle ground presidents. And, he didn't really want to be president at all either way, which is surprising considering he had an okay presidency. Like I said, he was the last of the reformers. So he was the last real president to focus on busting monopolies and destroying trusts, which were basically just big fat cats making more and more money by cheating the workers out of what they rightly deserved. William Howard Taft did a good job of breaking these up. And while he wasn't very well recognized as president because, people didn't like him because he tended to fall asleep during cabinet meetings and didn't seem very well informed. After leaving the presidency, which he was ready to leave, he did not enjoy that job. He was often quoted as saying, "Politics disgust me." A president said that. He went on to become a Supreme Court judge, the chief Supreme Court judge, which is huge because he's one of the few presidents ever to be in both he was the only president to be in the executive branch and the judicial branch. Most are in the legislative and the executive, but he was in the executive and the judicial. And he did a good job as chief Supreme Court justice. And just to put that into context, he's the guy who swears in presidents. So we had a president swearing in a different president. Moving on from William Howard Taft to the first Democrat president of all time. Next up is Andrew Jackson. He was our 7th president. He was our first Democrat, and he was president from 1829 to 1837. Like I've said before in my Martin Van Buren episode, when the Democratic Republican Party, that's a mouthful, a little bit confusing, when it broke apart Andrew Jackson formed the Democratic Party using the principles that Thomas Jefferson held very dear. They were very big on states' rights and making sure that each state it wasn't the government completely control everything, that each state had their own say in the way they should be governed. This ended up kind of backfiring and causing the Civil War when states argued for how slavery should be addressed, if states' rights should be, observed. Andrew Jackson was seen as our first people's president. He was down to earth. He wasn't a powder-wig politician. He was a down-to-earth Westerner. He fought in the Revolutionary War. He was a general. He was an American general before going into politics. He really was an American, you might say. In addition to being a people's president, Andrew Jackson pushed to give the presidency more power. At this point, the presidency was a big job, but it didn't have as much power or influence as it really should have at that point. Andrew Jackson pushed and made sure that the president chooses his own vice president. At that time, whoever was running with the president at that point and came close to becoming president would be his vice president. To put that into context, Donald Trump's vice president would have been Hillary Clinton. And that's bad because you have two different rivaling people, and the vice president is his closest advisor. In addition to this, Andrew Jackson also updated the cabinet, making it so that the president could kick out and choose his own cabinet members as he saw fit. This is very, very good when you're thinking about these are your closest advisors. You should be able to trust them, and if you don't trust them, you got to be able to kick them out. So he really helped define the presidency in a really healthy way that helped it grow. There are two small bad things in his presidency, but they're not big enough to completely dominate or destroy his good things, you might say. The first one is he started the spoils system. You know, the one that James Garfield was trying to fight against, where if you were friends with the president, you got in a high place. But even though Andrew Jackson started this spoils system, it wasn't to the extent that it was getting to when James Garfield was president, when he was president. It was more his friends were being put in his cabinet, but he had good political friends that were good for the job. But when other presidents saw, oh, he did that, maybe I should do that too, they didn't have the kind of friends and advisors that Andrew Jackson did. The other not so great thing was the economy. Like I said with my Martin Van Buren section, Andrew Jackson was not good with economy and put it into a downturn that Martin Van Buren had to clean up, and he wasn't able to. Well, that's one more episode checked off and done. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a little longer than usual, but we have a lot of presidents to cover, and we want to make sure that each of them has their own section of stuff. We want to make sure you guys subscribe, like, comment below, and we got more stuff on the way, so keep your eyes peeled and tell everybody about the channel. Stay awesome.